The NBA season is now 40% done. Each team has played about 30-ish games, and the new year is finally upon us. We are now in the middle, the dredges of the NBA season, and because of that, we figured now would be the best time to discuss the biggest surprises and disappointments so far. Before we get into that, like, subscribe, comment down below who has surprised you and disappointed you the most, and let's get straight into it. This is the Sweatshop OT. The Pelicans. And there's a whole story, there's a whole thing with the Pelicans. Like all the other teams, like the 76ers, I had them in my championship contenders. But as I said in that video, any team that I have in the playoffs, if you were to say one of them were to completely crash and burn, the Sixers were going to be my number one contender. But yeah, the Pelicans, like I didn't have them super high in the playoff standings, but I still expected them to be somewhat in the play-in race. They're leading the charge for the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, the Capture the Flag sweepstakes. Yeah, they're looking for another Duke savior, and man, I just don't know with Zion. Like people, every single time I talk about Zion, I talk about how you can't trust him because of how often he gets injured. And I remember a comment in one of my videos where it was like, oh, he played 70 games this season. You're not going to give him credit for that? And it's like, I need to see multiple seasons back to back. And even last season when he played 70 games, he injured his hamstring and he wasn't able to play in the playoffs when they really needed him. And then this year comes again. I was watching, I think it was, I can't remember what show it was on, but it was Shams Charania. And he said that the reason that the Pelicans aren't able to give a date on Zion's injury isn't because that they just don't know what this injury. It's a basic hamstring injury. In normal situations, it would be like 4 to 6 weeks. But because Zion is so injured, they can't give a date because they just literally don't know with his body. Like Zion is befuddling NBA professional trainers. And you add that on top of all the other injuries with the Pelicans, which sucks because I really like their roster. I wasn't so sure about the DeJounte Murray trade, but still, I really like their roster overall. They look rough right now. A lot of it's due to injury, but at this point in the season, it's almost like, is it even worth it trying to make a push for the play-in tournament? This draft is supposed to be akin to the one 2 years ago with Victor, the one 2 years ago with Victor and them, Cooper Flag, Ace Bailey, all those guys. So I don't like saying tank anymore, but you almost have no other option, especially with how many players they have that are injured.
They're the most circumstantial team probably in the entire league right now. They're very similar to where the Memphis Grizzlies were last year, where it was like a team that should be way better. Like they're last in the conference right now in the West. However, like as players are starting to come back and be a little bit more healthy, like there have been a couple games where, like especially in the third quarter, where they might be getting blown out. They've made some like pretty significant strides, like the game against, I think it was the Suns. They had like the biggest comeback this season. And so the talent is there. Like they have a pretty well-balanced team, but just like on the top end where you would be relying on stars like Brandon Ingram, who's just been ruled out with an ankle injury. And then with a guy like Zion, who should be, leading your team, with that top end talent out, it makes it so much harder to really live up to the expectations that were, sort of laid upon you at the beginning of the season. My next biggest surprise, I think, this is probably on the radar for a lot of people. The Cavs are, might be right there with the Thunder in terms of building a team the right way, between the two conference leaders, like they have both done things that I think are mirror each other in a lot of ways. So the biggest thing is they both have two guards, Donovan Mitchell and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who weren't brought in by the organization via the draft, but were acquired in a trade, and like a pretty good trade at that. And then they just have complementary pieces around these guys that are doing what needs to be done night in and night out. And what's really nice about the Cavs is they have really 3 guys on the point of attack. And I'm not going to say take over. I would leave that mainly to Donovan. But Evan Mobley just had a 41-point game where, you know, he was just taking advantage of whatever the defense was giving him. Mind you, they were playing Charlotte, but they were leaving a guy open who I really thought had struggled with, you know, his 3-point shot. And he was hitting, you know, pick and pop threes like it was nothing. And he was getting good looks, too, on any time, you know, the roll was clogged up. You know, he, you know, catch it high and just put it in. Like, and then the fact that they still have Jared Allen protecting the paint too. Like, this is a really well balanced team. And people like Max Strus and George Niang, who I still just don't understand how that guy looks the way he does and is in the league. The fact that they have guys like them, as well as Dean Wade coming off the bench, adding to a balanced attack, I think is just going to show, like, if you can build your roster the right way, it doesn't need to be, you don't need to trade for star after star. Sometimes it's just like developing some of your homegrown talent, like, you know, Mobley and Darius Garland, and just giving them the time to gel. And really, you know, they've suffered some pretty significant losses together, and I think that helps build and congeal a team like the way that they've shown they have been able to do this season. Because, I mean, besides the Celtics, it's Cleveland this year who are real threats in the NBA. The Cavs have just looked really, really good, and I've been very impressed with what they've had to offer.
Yeah, the Cavs are definitely probably the Warriors and Clippers. I talked a lot of shit on, and they both look to be pretty decent. But the Cavs are definitely the one team that I probably was the most surprised by. I didn't think they were bad. I just thought they were going to be a middle of the pack team. But they have looked amazing so far this year, and pretty much, I don't want to say all the credit, because Evan Mobley did have to step up to the plate and step up his game. Also, everyone else on the roster. But
they've just improved so much. They've just improved so much offensively. Like, they're the number one offensive in the league, and they're a great 3-point shooting team.
Yeah, and I think that a large portion of their improvement has to go to coaching. Kenny Atkinson has been one of the most underrated coaches. Maybe not in NBA fandom, because I feel like he generally is seen pretty positively by people that are in the know among NBA fans. But in the league, I don't understand how this man didn't have a job for how long he did after the job he did with the Brooklyn Nets prior. That was the team right before the KD and Kyrie Nets that had D'Angelo Russell. I think Thaddeus Young may have been on that team, but it was just like, it was not a good roster, and he had them playing very well. That was a team that was dancing on the bench all the time, that looked like the chemistry was through the roof. I just don't understand how this man didn't have a job for so long, and it appears that he's once again worked his magic, and now the Cavs appear to be playing. I don't know if they're this good. I still want to see them in the playoffs, but they appear to be, I mean, they look great. They've looked like the best team in the league so far, maybe other than the Boston Celtics, but yeah, they've looked great. And I think Kenny Atkinson is the main catalyst for it. The main reason on the court I think they're so much better is Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley has been so much better this year, so much more consistent and aggressive offensively. And I think I saw somewhere that was Kenny Atkinson's main focus, the main thing he wanted to kind of instill into the team when he came in there, to get Evan Mobley more touches and give him more, what's the word I'm looking for?
A greater role.
A bigger role, a little more maybe autonomy on offense.
He's definitely created more of his own shots this season, and that's like something good to see. Like, there's been a few instances where, you know, he'll get a pass at the top of the key, and it looks like he has that freedom to really kind of go through and make his own decision, instead of just kind of being like a pick and pop guy which, traditionally he hasn't really been before, but like definitely moving away from maybe that pick and roll position. Like he is an incredible roller, and the dude is just like crazy long, but he's definitely picking his spots a little bit more, and I think that's kind of helping take some of the pressure off of Darius Garland and especially Donovan Mitchell. Like I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but I would assume Donovan Mitchell's usage rate has probably dropped a considerable amount this season. But for a guy that has, an Evan Mobley that has been a career 29% three-point shooter to jump all the way up to 40.7, that's a big deal. Like he's the thing. I think he's able to take advantage of the fact that he's getting the shots in the first place and he's knocking them down. Like none of his stats are crazy by any means. He'll definitely be an all-star, I imagine, this year. But that 3-point percentage is a massive, massive deal.
And yeah, you were correct about Donovan Mitchell's usage rating. It's the second lowest. It's tied for the second lowest of his career. The only lower one is his rookie season, actually. And I think that's honestly been a trend for the whole of the NBA, maybe even for the last few seasons. I feel like we already know that we've been pivoting away from big threes and stuff of that nature to more well-balanced rosters. I think this season has kind of solidified that you don't just need a deep roster, you need less usage from your star player. Still star focused, but just less weight on their shoulders. Clearly this is the new wave in current modern basketball. The Cavs embrace it. The Warriors, who aren't as good as the Cavs, but still a pretty good team, embrace it. And the Celtics embrace it. They have embraced it for the last few years. Yeah, Cavs definitely probably the biggest surprise, positive or negative, out of this whole season.
I'll finish up my biggest surprises / disappointments, though, if you don't mind. Memphis Grizzlies. They've been one of the biggest surprises for me. I don't know why I ever forgot about them in the first place. They were a 2 seed just 2 years ago. But they are a very exciting team to watch. And there's a specific player on the Grizzlies that I think needs a shout out, and that is the son of an NBA legend and Scottie Pippen Jr. He's kind of emerged into this point guard / shooting guard role that's, I think, emulates that of like either of the Jones brothers. And it's been fun to watch him. Like I think he had like a 30-point triple-double at some point this season. But right now he's averaging almost 11 points a game on 47% shooting, and has been a very, very competent and serviceable backup guard. And times where, Ja Morant has just been out with injury, and I think that's kind of a big deal for the Memphis Grizzlies, like to have that there. Jaren Jackson Jr. I think is in a position to. I think he's playing for a new contract, but he's played well this season as well. I've been a little disappointed in Zach Edey. There's a lot of hype coming into this season from the preseason that I don't know if he's necessarily lived up to. So we might have to take a step back on his rookie campaign. But in the times that he has played, he just needs to not foul as much, and I think he's going to be in a good spot going forward. And then of course with Ja Morant being back, they've looked a lot better, and I think right now they're currently third or fourth in the West for standings.
They're third, 16-8, so 66% win percentage.
That's pretty good. It's a team that's exciting. They are an exciting team to watch. They have some guys like Kim Char and I forgot, is it like Ali Saba or something like that? That have like just these
Aldama.
Aldama. just these really unathletic looking white guys that just come out of nowhere and throw down like some crazy ass, dunks. That is just like, you'll see that on NBA Top 10 or whatever, and you're like, really, this guy? And then they throw down a dunk that you're just like, whoa, okay.
They have another guy, Jay Huff, center, their backup center, and I was watching a game and he hit the craziest. I think it was like a putback reverse dunk or something like that. It may not have been reverse, but I remember being like, oh, okay, sneaky athleticism. but yeah, they got a good rotation of those types of guys.
Yeah, and I've been impressed by him. Who's your last?
Well, first I want to touch on the Grizzlies. One little thing that I think the Pelicans may be able to pull a little bit of solace from. The Grizzlies last year almost benefited from the amount of injuries they got, not just from their pick ending up top 10 and them getting Zach Edey, who I do think will improve over the course of the season, but also because they were able to get a lot of their prospects that normally wouldn't get any playing time on most any other team. They were able to get a lot of them actual starter minutes and reps and give them a lot of experience. So they were actually able to see last year a lot of the players that would end up being solid role players for them this year. And I think that's led to them having a genuinely deep roster because they were able to get guys that normally wouldn't get any experience last year, a lot of experience. So now they're solid role players. And yeah, I think that's helped them. They look like a really solid team. I think honestly, this year, my whole thing is I'm always late to people in the playoffs. So I need to see teams in the playoffs before I say how good they are. But they look very promising this year, and I'm very intrigued by them. I guess the Hawks. The Hawks have been they may be boring like the Nets. At least they have Trae Young that we can talk about. But the Hawks have been another really solid team, and this isn't fully surprising. But I did still expect them to be, I think 9th or 10th in the East. But this team reminds me a lot of the Trae Young team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals like 4 or 5 years ago, and that's because I think the issue that the Hawks fell into is that they tried to capitalize on Trae Young's offensive excellence by making a super-powered offense. I think the way to build around Trae Young is to just bank on him carrying your team offensively and surround him with a lot of solid defenders. And I think that's what they did in the DeJounte Murray trade, and it appears to be working out well.
What's crazy to me is to see Trae Young in a position that he's in right now. Like, he's leading the league currently in assists. Mind you, he's also committing almost 5. He's leading the league in assists at 12.3, but he's almost committing 5 turnovers a game. I really don't think it's necessarily Trae that has had has made the biggest impact, where the focus has been more towards him. Like a guy like Jalen Johnson, the emergence of a guy like Jalen Johnson is where I think you really need to send your focus. Most of all, like he's almost a 20 and 10 guy a game. He's shooting better from the field than Trae. Like almost at 50% a game, and then he's a better 3-point shooter too.
I don't think, but it's different. It's different types of 3-pointers, like the 3-pointers Trae is taking, and also I don't think Jalen Johnson. I love Jalen Johnson. He was one of the players I was really excited about this year, and I'm happy he's averaging what he's averaging. I don't think he averages what he averages if Trae Young isn't dishing out 13 assists per game. Like if he's asked to be, I don't want to rag on Jalen Johnson. I'm just saying I think Trae Young's impact, even though he's particularly inefficient this year,
he's looking good now, at least for his season averages. He's also one of those guys that's just like so much fun to watch. He's an attack first kind of player, where like there's been several times this season where he can just jump out of the gym. He's one of those guys like Shaden Sharp and the Thompson twins that is just a freak athlete. And he's been in the league a little bit longer than I think just the Thompson twins, but so he's been given the reins a little bit more on offense to kind of create his own shot. But he's also been a very serviceable passer. I mean, he's second on the team in terms of assists, and he's looked decent. And he's also a pretty good defender, and that's something that the Hawks have really benefited from is the defense.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jalen Johnson has had a really, really good start to the year. I'm sure the Hawks are very excited about him. I think he was supposed to be like one of the best players in that draft, and then he dropped to like 20 or something like that, and now he's looking like one of the best players in the draft a few years ago.